Okay, you can hear me okay?
Oh yeah, yeah. Hare Krishna, beautiful people, and welcome to the Soul Shriya podcast. We are your hosts, Bhakti Jake,
Balaram Shaktidas.
and we are finally together in the same place at the same time, and we are devoted to bring you ancient wisdom for the modern day. Join us as we read the Krishna book by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, and let us share with you the wonderful shelter or ashraya of our dear Lord Krishna. Please join us in the sublime process of transforming our consciousness by hearing and discussing spiritual concepts. And we have a very special guest with us today. We have none other than our very good friend, Raghunath Cappo.
Hare, Hare Krishna, how are you? Honored.
I'm great.
Sorry, I'm sort of hard to track down. We've tried to do this for a while.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm 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 like one of these people that just wakes up grateful every day for anything that I have. I'm like so low maintenance, it's ridiculous.
Good attitude goes a long way in the material world and in the spiritual world. It's a necessity.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
So we're hoping to talk with you about attitude, about lifestyle as a yogi. You've been practicing yoga how long?
I'm 58 years old, so pretty I was 17, like, or maybe 18. I got into yoga. Got into yoga in New York City when yoga was not really popular. It was sort of weird and fringe. The only type of yoga studios out there were connected with some gurus. Now you can go to a power yoga or a vinyasa yoga or some secular workout yoga. But in the early 80s, it was all generally connected with India, with gurus and things like that. So I got into it not actually to learn. I mean, a lot of people know me just from advanced asanas or handstands, but I didn't really get into it for that. I got into it because at that time in my life and still I had an appreciation as for India and the culture of India because I felt like it was a very very sort of mysterious yet in you know pre-internet source for metaphysical and spiritual topics that we weren't privy to in Western, perhaps Western thought. So I started diving into the spiritual books of India. I was already into Ayurvedic medicine at that point in my life because I had become a vegetarian, was very interested in how can I can eat healthy and not just junk food. And so all this stuff was fringe and weird. And I was okay because I was a punk. I was a punk hardcore singer of a band, and I was on the fringe too. It wasn't mainstream music. It was a world of corporate rock and arena rock. So I was living in New York City as a teenager, playing at, you know, dirty, nasty little clubs. We had a dirty, nasty little following, and yeah, I got fortunately got turned on to all interesting books on spirituality and everything. So that sort of was my introduction into yoga, which was just another facet of an alternative scene back in the mid 80s.
Yeah. So that whole scene has changed a lot
The
because
yoga scene, yeah.
it's so much more mainstream now. So maybe you could talk to us, or yeah, talk with us about how bhakti yoga as a lifestyle is interfacing with that world, and just like what exactly is that, and like how do you see people incorporating this into their life, understanding this, like how do we understand like what bhakti yoga is, because it's like Hare Krishna is still pretty fringe. I mean, it's as you were saying with your exposure, very connected to India, to gurus. It's not something like your hot yoga class, and so people
Sure.
might not really understand what's being offered.
Um, how yoga how modern secular physical yoga can interface with actually traditional yoga system is if you have a teacher that can explain it. And if you have a teacher, here's the deal. People have tight lower backs, they're stressed, they're overworked, they have bad hamstrings, they have lower back issues, they have sciatica issues. Um, and then there is like deep love of God, the highest thing you could think of that connects every living being on the planet together, the thing that'll actually fulfill your heart's desires. You have that on one side, and I've got a tight, hamstrings on the other side. The yoga teacher, the Bhakti yoga teacher, is the person who can draw a bridge from one side to another across that gaping hole. Now, I had to do that in punk rock world. Like I had a punk rock band called Shelter. And Shelter, we had to explain how actually a real alternative life is to live authentically as the soul wants to live. And that we're not going to change the world by blaming the world and pointing out the problems of the world unless we have skin in the game in fixing those problems. And fixing those problems starts with us. So that's how I sort of created that bridge within the music world in my little universe. But as far as the yoga world, well, that's like fishing in a bucket, and it's like it's like it's like that's what you come to a yoga class. You got that's the origins of yoga, is worship, is connection, is we are spirit. So it's most yoga teachers can't explain that because most yoga teachers were trained by the same secular, if not atheist, yoga teachers who do it for breathing and endorphin release and physical therapy. If you're a practitioner of bhakti, it's important to have your body healthy. It's important to be calm. It's important to feel good in your body and in your mind. But we also understand that even if you check all those boxes, there is a lack that we have. And that lack is a deeper connection, an understanding that the world is temporary, that instead of, falling in love with the things of this world, uh, we fall in love with a higher power, with our source. And we understand that truthfully everything here is like big deal. It's actually all on loan to us. And so everybody's looking for it, whether you have lots of money, whether you have little money, everybody thinks they're trying to fall in love with something in this world. They're actually looking for source. They're actually looking for God. And we have to explain that. And we have to, as a yoga teacher, we have to understand it deeply. We have to really think about it deeply. And then we have to be able to share that and share why it's important and give people that experience of what real yoga is. And you can start that by just adding mantras or mantra meditation to the class. We've sort of taken meditation and breathing and mantras and kirtan, and we've sort of separated them all. Those things are all metaphysical things. We want just a physical workout. I got an hour a day. Just let me work my body. But actually, you can't, in the yoga system, you're not really supposed to separate it. It's just like, what good is my carburetor if I just take it out of the car? The carburetor works in context. It doesn't work isolated. So yeah, you do get some benefit out of a carburetor. You can use it as a paperweight. You can toss it around with a baseball mitt to a friend, but it's got a higher purpose as well. So there is benefit from doing yoga devoid of the spirituality. There's benefit of doing meditation devoid of spirituality. There's benefit of doing pranayama devoid of spirituality. And there's teachers that you can find that do all those things. But if you want the full pie, if you want the full spectrum, health, healing, wellness, and connection, that's what Bhakti Yoga is. And that's what a Bhakti Yoga teacher can offer. Because we are not a body, we are not a mind, we are actually something divine, and that we have just forgot. And so this real yoga system is a wake up practice. It's a wake up and remember what we have forgotten. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm not black. I'm not white. I'm not gay or straight. I'm not a gender preference. I'm not a pronoun. My only pronoun is I'm a pure spirit soul, and I forgot, and I'm desperately trying to remember. That's what we are. That's our real identity. And if you say, well, what religion is that? That's the identity, man. That's our identity. We're not of any religion. That's all. Religions are temporary also. We're spiritual soul. This is Sanatan Dharma. This is Shabda Brahman. This is truth. No one person has a monopoly on God. No one church has a monopoly on God. No one culture does. There is truth, there is spirit, there is divinity, there is source, and there is forgetfulness. And so Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, from me comes remembrance and comes forgetfulness. You can have either one. If you want to forget that we're part of something bigger, I will give you the intelligence so you can forget about me. And if you want to remember and you want to approach divinity, no matter what religion you are, you just make that prayer. Say that mantra. Just say, Lord, I want to remember you. I want to remember myself as a spiritual being. And that will be awoken in us somehow. And God can tag any number of people to inspire you on your path.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I kind of, before we got going here, I kind of let Balaram know that we were not going to hijack the show and just talk about hardcore for the whole show. So I do remember like the good old days of like I saw Shelter in Syracuse and Buffalo, like when I was very young, you know, like when I was coming up, I guess. Amazing. The only thing is like I didn't understand it back then. It was so cutting edge and so I want to say high tech because spiritual things are usually very high tech. That it was just like going over my head, you know, like I didn't understand, like, you know, oh, these guys are like Hare Krishnas or whatever. But now, you know, that years have gone by and everything, now everything's clicking and everything's making sense, you know? Um, it's almost like you have to let life kind of like beat you around a little bit, kind of like get to that, like we all have like that lowest point that we get to, you know? And then it's like, oh, what do I do? You know?
Sure.
Basically,
so, yeah.
you know, what our main issue in this world is the mind, right? And the whole function of the mind is to just kind of split your reality into black or white, good or bad, happiness, distress, pain, pleasure, and it just attaches itself to one of those things. It said, this is the way that I am selecting that life is valid. And so if you fit in this box, you're my friend, this works. And if you're not, you know, I have to cancel you. That just doesn't work for me. You know, so we're staying on what we call the mental platform, which is a world of duality. You're not able to see anything beyond that because you've attached your consciousness. You say, this is the way that reality is. Yep. And in fact, you are a spirit soul, as you're saying, like you are not any of these designations. So something has to crack that open. Then you can see that these are all just technologies. They're all just tools, they're all just levels of the mind and senses and so forth that are meant to take in information and, you know, allow our spirit to act creatively in this world. And it's like, it doesn't matter what filters you're working with. It's like, okay, like I have a tall body, right? Very tall, like I have to take that into account. It's like,
it's like 12 feet tall.
I'm like at least 11 feet tall. There's certain places like I'm not going to be able to fit my body. You know, there's certain things like reaching high shelves, like that's going to be something I'm just going to have to do that for other people.
Then you got short people like me. I'm just walking under tables, like no big deal. Spill something on the ground, I'll get it.
So it's the consciousness shining through that we're interested in. And so what I'm hearing, what I'm understanding is Bhakti Yoga is interested in making a shift there. And like all of these other things are just, they're all secondary to that.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. I think
Yeah.
you guys hit it
I
on the head. That was really well. You really explained that well, I felt.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and Jake, sorry I missed you in the hardcore scene, but yeah, you made it point. The world, if we're fortunate, the world will ripen us to understanding truth. Otherwise, we remain just unripe, and we just go through the world, and it doesn't make sense. And we hear about wisdom and thinking deeper about ourselves and thinking of ourselves as spiritual beings. It doesn't sound relevant. If we're fortunate, the world ripens us. And then the same message I heard maybe when I was 16, then I heard it again at 20, and maybe some of it made sense. And then all of a sudden, I'm at a fork in my road. I've hit a rock bottom, or I have so much good fortune, but I'm not happy. I've climbed to a ladder of success, but I've got some emptiness inside my heart. Or maybe I climbed the ladder of success, and then I lost my career, or I've got some ill health. Then all of a sudden, those words of satyam, those eternal truths, start to resonate with the soul, and you're like, wow, I've heard this a million times, but now I get it. Just like a puzzle piece. I could have tried that puzzle piece in a million other places, and then boom, right at that spot, that's the spot. And that's a special, special moment when you're open and ripe and ready to hear transcendental truth. And the second thing is, what are you going to do with it? Because some people hear it, it makes sense. We feel like now I'm a little bit enlightened. Maybe something happened. Maybe a loved one dies and it wakes us up, or maybe we lost all our wealth, or maybe we realize, well, what's the big point of this anyway? Maybe we do an acid trip or a mushroom trip or ayahuasca trip, and we get some spiritual download. So now, with all that information, if we're lucky, we get these downloads. What are you going to do with that? And that's what's right. Go ahead.
Because I was thinking the same exact thing. He's like, what am I going to do? This is like, and we have Bhakti Brian here with us. And Brian, if you want to chime in, because we've talked about this many times, like, our intro to Bhakti was like, having these acid trips, these like really high experiences, and then coming to the understanding that, like, I have to actually integrate something that I can live. It's not just about reaching a high. It's like, how does that transform every moment of my experience, right? Like, how am I it's like spiritual life cannot be a passive thing. It's not an armchair thing. And if you find yourself at the end of the trip, as I have, like sitting on that armchair and then just getting humilified, it's like, oh wow, I'm actually stagnating.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Brian, what was your experience?
Well, anytime I had taken any psychedelic, even, when I would eat edibles, just marijuana edibles, I would like have these, I guess you could call them like downloads. Like I would have these like extremely deep realizations. And like, fortunately for me, my father, who like, encouraged me to take psychedelics, would help me to kind of interpret what they meant. But I just kept learning the same recurring lessons. Like, I need to, be good. I need to love others. I need to, be actually one of the main recurring messages from psychedelics was that I need to be sober. I need to stop taking all drugs and just be sober. And, I just kept having those. And then I kept saying like, okay, like I need to follow what these are trying to teach me. And so, after, years of suffering, I decided like, and I also had different experiences here and there. Like one of my friends actually grew up in the Hare Krishna movement. His name is Varshana, and his mother grew up in New Vrindavan. And so whenever I would hang out with him, he would kind of like tell me, oh, some of these lessons that you're sharing with me, I learned growing up, like, and all the only experience I had was taking acid and shrooms. So it's like the fact that they would connect with his the teachings that he was given. And also, I knew some Christian people who were like, oh, that connects with my religion too. And it just, it got to the point where I was like, I have to see this through. I really have to see what I'm being shown here. So
I
I
love
kind of
it.
got really fed up with all the suffering, and that's when I just made the random decision to go over to New Vrindavan and live there
Oh,
for a
wow.
couple months.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful. Beautiful story. Yeah.
absolutely.
Most people won't act on it, and they'll keep going back to the acid trip. But unless it leads you to a lifestyle, how are we going to live? Just keep dosing and dosing and dosing. You know, where does that actually take a life? When I've never seen necessarily positive experiences, especially if you're in this world, you have a job, you have a family. Um, eh, Bhakti yoga is the way to be in the world, but not of the world. And it's and what you've done is you've got deep realizations from those. But you know, I don't know if you read my book, but I mentioned the similar thing in my book. Was I've got this spiritual download because I had a teacher, not a Krishna conscious teacher, but a teacher give me some mushrooms to take, and it was really going against a lot of the values I believed in, because I believe that, you know, why would God give us something, you know, to take to find God? Can't Isn't God powerful enough to give me his own my own realizations? But at that time, I really didn't know much, and this guy seemed really spiritual, and a lot of people looked up to him as a very spiritual person. And he said to me, this is the way of the mystic masters, Ray. And I was like, okay, well, what do I know? I'm 19. What do I know of masters anyway? I don't know anything. So I did it, and I felt like I got some deep realizations from it. And later, when I realized that guy was sort of bogus, and he was just, having sex with the ladies and I was working with, and he was a little bit of a charlatan. I found some devotees who were sincerely practicing, and I said, this makes a lot of sense to me, but I did take mushrooms, and I got a lot of deep realizations, very similar to the things you guys are sharing. And so he said, well, sometimes you can take psychedelics and have a bad trip too. Isn't that true? And I was like, yeah, that's true. I had a friend that killed himself taking acid. Um, I just like ran in front of a train deliberately. And which I get. You could say, well, it's all temporary. I'm running into a train. But I also said, but what do you make about it? Because my main takeaway from my mushroom trip was the whole material world is temporary, and I need to surrender to God. And I will say it sort of drove me to bhakti, because one of the other things I remember writing down in my journal was everything those Krishna guys have told you is true. And I was like, well, what do you say about that? So maybe the mushrooms are good. And he said, don't mistake the flute for the player of the flute, meaning behind the instrument you're using for the realization is God. Not everyone needs psychedelics to find God. It's not. You can use them to find God. You could use anything. You could use like cancer to find God. You could use your wife or husband cheating on you to find God. You could win the lottery and find God, or you could lose everything and find God. God will use anything and everything if you have a desire to find him. If you take one little step towards God, he will take 1,000 running steps towards you. So maybe in our cases, in Brian's cases, he used these psychedelics, which can give you deeper realizations about the metaphysical reality and not make it seem so weird. But what are we going to do with that? I find that to be the big question, and not just keep on spinning around and not acting upon it.
Totally. Can I share something?
Yeah, please.
So after I received all of those messages, and I received them from all sorts of, well, after I had taken the substances, I started to realize that like a show I watched or a movie I watched or a book I read or something my friend said all resonated with that exact same message. And then I started to realize the most powerful thing, which is that if I don't pursue the if I don't see through, the lessons that I've learned here, then it will all have been for nothing. And so it was almost like if I don't, follow the path and not just, wallow in the pleasures and the drugs or whatever it was, like if I don't follow what they were trying to teach me, then I'll have wasted all of it. And I need to take advantage of these things that I've been learning and really see, to the full extent what they were trying to teach me.
So good. Great realization.
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I believe William Blake is the one who coins the golden thread. This idea that no matter where you are in life, there's always the end of a thread, this golden thread that takes you, where you need to go. And the lessons in life are just positioning you to follow that. And I want to, do you have anything to ask? Because I want to segue to these.
Yeah, to
this person.
Okay, yes. Actually, that would be perfect. I just, because I'm kind of multitasking here, so I kind of just caught the tail end of that last thing. But I mean, I don't think I ever really got into psychedelics and stuff like that. I will say I can, like, if we're talking about substances, I can definitely say that without a doubt, I can tell you that alcohol is one of the most evil substances that there is on the planet, because it's legal, it's socially acceptable, it's that a boy, here's a beer, like
And,
Baptist
and for some people, they cannot have one drink. They have to have 10. And so, yeah, it's a very slippery slope when you play around. It's like playing with fire, or playing with electricity, and you're a child. People say, well, what's the big deal? Just have a glass of wine, just have 2 glasses of wine. There is a problem there, actually. And the problem is that there's people that look up to you. And whether you believe it or not, there are people that look up to you. And you might be able to have 1 or 2 glasses of wine, but they can't. And there are 12-step meetings in basements of churches all across America for such people who've who've played with fire and have gotten burnt so bad it dismantled their life, perhaps put them in jail, perhaps they killed somebody, perhaps they almost killed themselves, perhaps they lost their career. And so you're saying, well, what's the big deal? You know what? You might have skated right through it. It's not a big deal for you. But somebody looking up to you, or someone that loves you, and then someone that you may love yourself, it might be a very, very big deal. And people have been telling me this since I was 17 years old and I was straight edge. They said, you're so, you're so corny. You're so, like, uptight. You're so, really? Go to a 12-step meeting and see how corny I am. There's real problems coming from alcohol. Very, very real problems, including driving while intoxicated, children dying in the cars. It's like I don't know what the ranking is. Number 2 killer, number 3 killer, maybe. Car accidents, and it's devastating. And maybe it's not devastating to you, but it's a very, very real problem. And if you want to change the world, get off alcohol. Teach your kids not to drink alcohol. I always tell my kids, as far as alcohol, because they're teenagers now, is I'll say, you know what? There's no good that can come from it. There's no good. And if there is a hair of good, it is so outweighed by the megalithic blocks of bad that can come from it.
That's a great way to put it. That is a great way to put it. It's like, yeah, I mean, that's where I'm coming from. That was like the world that I was living in,
Yeah.
Me and Jiva G have got a fantastic relationship. I highly recommend the Bhakti Recovery Group to everybody and anybody. Me myself, I'm 6 years sober, but I still consider myself to be a recovering alcoholic, because it's an everyday thing. And it really is, because it is such a slippery slope, And I am definitely in that category of, like, all or nothing, like I just stay right away from it altogether. And I tell you, I mean, when I came to Krishna consciousness, it was like it was like a lightning bolt, like it just energized my spiritual life. It was like just like a supercharge, because it makes so much sense, and it just got me on the right path. I'm the truly right path. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And I love her podcast too. Bhakti Recovery Podcast.
Oh,
So
amazing.
good. The BRG podcast. I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
I love Jiva G. She's, whatever, 20 plus years sober, completely authentic person, definitely spiritually connected. And, she'll admit herself. She's a dented can. She's struggling. She's on the path of progress, not perfection. And so I love her. I love her approach to explaining God consciousness and Krishna consciousness, and how most of all she's just there for people. She's there for people who, whatever they need. You want, pure bhakti, she can talk about pure bhakti subjects. You want to talk about just like getting your head out of your addiction and stop running in circles and running into the same stone walls face first again and again. She can talk about that. She can help you with that. She's completely empowered, I believe, and is doing a massive maha service to the bhakti community and anybody interested in bhakti, but perhaps struggling with some type of debilitating addiction, whether it's drugs, sex, spending, eating, etc. These things that sort of take us down a slippery slope. They start off, hey, big deal, it's fun, it's cool, and next thing you know, you're in debt, you're an addict, you're broken, your partner left you, you lost your children, you lost your job, etc. So yeah, Bhakti recovery, impressive.
Yeah, it's like there's two kinds of people in the world. It's those who are, again, on the mental platform, which is the addict mind. And then there's those who realize that there is an addict mind and that exists in all of us, that potential for all or nothing to go down a slippery slope. So you have the addicts who are just in it. They're not able to break out of those cycles, whether or not they're aware of them. And then there's those on the path of recovery. And I see that as the spiritual life. And, speaking to what Jake said with the lightning bolt, it's like this is the real like part. Like this is the juice of the spiritual life is it's not only you and your mind, because then it would be, got a little mouse and a little hamster wheel.
Yeah,
You're not going to get very far.
Yeah.
But Bhakti Yoga is really about opening yourself up to that higher power that's just going to smash obstacles. Yeah. So I want to segue to Krishna here. And at the end of the last show, the last show we talked about, inner space, and you're talking about skin in the game. It's like realizing that your life has an impact on your inner worlds, right? And there's a purpose to all these things, and ultimately it's about devotion, right? Utilizing what you have in devotion and getting out of your head into transcendental life. And Srila Prabhupada brought up the Mayavad conception. So I want to ask you to speak with this frame of those like Mayavada, how we can understand that in the current social context of those who do not have skin in the game of inner transformation, and then who is Krishna? How can we understand as a society in today's world, who is this personality? And who's Krishna?
Okay, got a couple different questions going on.
Yep.
I'll start with the last one. The last one is, who is Krishna? A lot of times from a Western perspective, we worship God with great awe, with great reverence. We call God omniscient, omnipotent. The Judeo-Christian understanding of God is God is powerful. God should be feared. I grew up with, these phrases like God will punish you, and almost like God is some very, very cruel judge where you either follow his rule or go right to hell eternally, which to me never was super appealing as a loving God. It didn't seem how God was love. It seemed like God was the ultimate sadist, and that's how he was presented, at least by certain people. It's one thing if your father says, go to your room, come down for dinner. It's another thing he says, go to your room and never effing come out ever again. That doesn't seem like a loving God who's trying to teach a lesson. that seems like a condemning God. So um, Krishna is God, but he's a God of love. He's a God of a God. It's not like the sin. See, we have this concept of sin in the West, and we sometimes try to translate it into Sanskrit, but it's actually a different concept. The idea of sinning or getting some punishment, the punishment is not coming from God. It's come from we're punishing ourselves. Just like I can't take a gun and shoot out the tires of my car and say, yeah, see what happened? The car sucks. Well, you just shot out the tires, you fool. You shot out the tires. So there are restrictions that are recommended in our spiritual practice, not to punish us, right? Just like when I grew up, it was like, oh God, you know, you can't do this, you can't do that. Thou shalt not do this. It's like, what kind of like um Debbie Downer is God? Like God doesn't want to have fun? No, it's not that. The ideas within boundaries. Again, back to a 12-step thing. Anybody in a 12-step program understands the importance of boundaries, the importance of regulating your senses, the importance of not letting your passions control your intelligence. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay the price for your actions. You're going to have to pay a price, and you can't expect to have no guardrails in your behavior with people, with your finances, with your sexuality, with your with the things that you're putting in your mouth. You can't expect to have no guardrails and expect it to turn out rosy every time. Um, um, Definitely, often people fly right off the road if there's no guardrails. So anybody who's a little bit thoughtful realize these rules or these guardrails that spiritual practices or any discipline, you know, if you want to become a great musician, you need certain guardrails. When all the kids are out playing, you can't play. You got to practice your violin. So you got to understand that having parameters in your life is important if you want to get great at anything. And by breaking those parameters, by going through the guardrails, you're setting yourself up to not live the best life you can, or in some cases, completely wreck your vehicle, completely go right off a cliff. And we've seen that again and again happen with people. Don't blame God that you drove your car off a cliff. God's not trying to punish you for that. God's just giving you some good advice. Hey, you got a car. Here's how you can take care of your car. Here's the owner's manual. You got to change the oil, got to rotate the tires. Don't blame God if your tires are worn out on one side. That's you didn't rotate them, you dumb. You know? So in the same way, there's spiritual regulations in all traditions that are separate than God. They're just what to do when you have a body, what to do when you have a mind, what should the spirit do to be happy? And you've never seen the answers so well put together in one format than Bhakti Yoga. At least I haven't. And I'm open to hearing more if anyone's got better ideas too, because I'm a truth seeker.
Would you say that not having those guardrails is what we're talking about when we say Mayavada?
Well,
It's like
Mayavada is something different.
Higher power, right?
Mayavada is something different. I didn't even get to Krishna yet. So Krishna is separate than the world of cause and effect. There is a higher power, a higher source. That is a God of love. That is all powerful. That is, you know, omniscient, all knowing. But Krishna is even something more unique than that. Krishna is unique to a Judeo-Christian concept of God, a Abrahamic tradition of God. He's even unique to a position of different than Lord Ram or Lord Vishnu. Krishna is God off duty, like God behind the scenes, God chilling out in the living room. You know what I mean? Just for example, if a king comes out on his balcony and he starts giving an address to all the citizens, everyone has a type of respect for that king within the kingdom. But the king also has a personal side where his guard is down, where he's very, very vulnerable, and where, in one sense, no one, when he goes out in public, no one can go near the king. He has a whole entourage that protect him. But when he's home privately, he will sometimes get on all fours so a little child, his little son or daughter, can ride on his back. It would be completely inappropriate if the citizens of the town would jump on the king's back, right? And treat him like a horse. But the king will take that position for their little child because they have an intimate, vulnerable relationship with that little child. Krishna is that vulnerable, loving, private, off-duty concept of our Abrahamic tradition of God, how we learned what God was. So it's a very unique position, even for source. It's a source with a particular name, a particular attitude, a particular personality, and it's very, very charming. In the same way, maybe that king would be much more charming in his personal life to his queen and to his children. Whereas publicly he has to come off like a great commander and he's stoic and he's fearless, etc. But there's a vulnerable side. So Krishna consciousness is even different than Vishnu Bhakti, even different than Ram Bhakti, even different. Any type of Bhakti, Krishna Bhakti is completely unique. So that's about Krishna. Now, there's some people, here's a good example too. So there's a power, using the same analogy of a king. Sometimes when I was little, we would go on a field trip to Washington, D.C., and they'd say, oh, that house over there, that's the White House. And there's guards in front of the White House, and there's fences in front of the White House. And, so you can't just run up to the White House. There's different protocol to get close. But the White House represents a type of power and a type of energy. And why? Because it's housing the leader of the free world, the guy who's got the numbers for the nuclear codes. So there's a potency in that place. So when we talk about God, also has an impersonal form. You can think of it almost like the White House. It represents a being that lives in that house. But it's because of that being that house has potency. So the concept of Brahman, or impersonal ideas of God, it's sort of like the light coming from the sun. It is similar to the sun, because you can't have one without the other. You can't have the light without the sun globe, and you can't have the sun globe without the light. They come together in a package. So the impersonal concept of God is also real. God has an effulgence that is powerful and worshipable. And some yogis want to worship God without form. And so they chant the mantras Om, right? But in Bhakti, we chant these mantras, Radhe Krishna, right? Sita Ram, Lakshmi, Narayan, like that. Those are personalistic mantras for developing love of that particular deity. Now, of course, the sunlight comes from the sun globe. That's just how it happens. And so therefore, we accept, we don't deny that chanting Om or reading texts that don't glorify God, we don't say that they're not bona fide texts. We say they give you Brahman realization. What Mayavad is when they say things like, yeah, there actually is no form of God. The real thing is just that there's a oneness, a light, but real. And yeah, well, what about these people worshiping God? Oh, that's just like a stepping stone. You worship God like that. You chant Hare Krishna, you chant, Sita Ram, just so you understand that ultimately there's nothing. There's just a oneness. And that's what we don't like. That because, for example, if sometimes, like, if your parent doesn't love your girlfriend or your boyfriend when you come home, the worst thing they can do is not even yell at them. The worst thing they can do is ignore them. Maybe better to say, I can't stand this person, because at least you know where they stand. But having that person sort of just like ignored, that's the biggest diss you can give somebody. So the concept of Mayavadis is that Krishna's not even a real thing. He's just the thing you get to. So you get to the idea of oneness. Where in Bhakti, we say, no, there is a oneness, but there's also Bhakti. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's like saying there is no president in the White House.
Yeah, there's just a White House.
Yeah. And people have this idea of president, but that's actually something inside you. You just have to realize that. And you can also, if you build this same structure in your backyard, you can also be president.
You can also be the right.
All right. Okay. I got to interject here real quick because
Please.
this is all just, like fuel for the fire of my mind right now. So I grew up in the Pentecostal tradition. And one thing that Pentecostals are very big on is authority, this concept of authority, and there's concept of spiritual authority. And in the Bible, there's many verses about how when Jesus had his ministry and was healing people, people were like, oh, I don't even have to go there. I can send someone else in my stead, and my man will still be healed, because they recognized the authority that Jesus had. Now, I think that it's really the exact same authority. Krishna is a loving God with authority, and that's what, like, authority. And I mean this
that's Balaram, right? Tomorrow's appearance day.
Authority in the way of, like, if you have a check, like someone writes you a check, like, you can't just take that check to the bank if it doesn't have their signature on it, like
Sure.
that kind of authority, not like a law enforcement, like police kind of authority or something like that.
Sure.
Like a more of a legal authority. They have the legal authority to give you things, to give you that. And that is so important, so key in believing in Krishna, in the actual embodiment of Krishna in all of his forms, not just like one avatar of him, but in all of his forms, because they're all really the same thing, really. So yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Prabhu. You guys are doing great stuff here. I'm honored that you had me come on.
Yeah.
Anything else? How else can I serve you guys?
Go ahead.
We got maybe 10 minutes, 7 or 8 minutes.
Yeah, we're getting close though.
Getting close. It would be, well, how about this? Because we probably don't have time to open up a paragraph and discuss it. Why don't you tell us about the Krishna book itself? What is a Krishna book? What is the potency of this book? Well, I'll maybe tie in this, because tomorrow is the appearance of Lord Balaram. So you have Krishna, you have that laid back, in his home Krishna, and then that authority, the representatives that go out, that all is like through this form of Balaram and his expansions, which include Vishnu, to hold deep science. And within that stream, we say that Balaram is the original guru, right? And so this is that authority that brings Krishna's potency into our life, and we can establish a relationship with the president and understand what is our duty as a citizen in this kingdom. How can I be the best version of myself in this world? So Krishna book is offering us a very exclusive window to the spiritual world. Can you tell us about the importance of this book and maybe your personal relationship with it?
Sure. Incredible book. I say if you read Krishna book for 20 minutes a day, you'll have a happy life. I'm really convinced of that. The Krishna book is the biggest canto, or the biggest section of a giant volume, a voluminous book called the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's 12 cantos in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the 10th canto, and it's the biggest. And it's all about the life and story of Lord Krishna, from childhood to disappearance. Now, when Prabhupada came to the West, he wanted to translate this entire book, the entire 18,000 verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And as he started writing it, he realized, you know what's going to happen? I'm old now, and there's every chance I could die. And then the students, who are just like children, basically, are not going to understand the 10th canto. Now, we have to understand that the 10th canto is not just Krishna growing up and living and dying and having kids, etc. It's all these highest conversations of love and almost eroticism as well. Now, what we know about eroticism of the material world is, well, eroticism is like, when we talk about eroticism, we think of like a gentleman's club, porn industry, sex workers or something like that. We'll think that that's erotic, and she comes over the house and she does this and this. It's everything is erotic, and generally people who are into pornography or things like that, that is also a slippery slope. Is like a person messing around with drugs. People, there's always a sad story behind it. It's never as sexy as it appears to be. What happened to religion being, about marriage and being a good person? And so if you were to read that 10th canto without deep explanations, it almost sounds just like a love romance. And the way you're supposed to read the Bhagavatam or these very, very deep spiritual literatures is with a teacher, is with a guru, is with commentaries on them. And so Prabhupada himself, when he was doing the translation, he had many, many books opens, many other commentaries that he was reading from, assimilating, and then writing into his commentaries. And that's how transcendental information is passed on. And the idea is that things of this world are perverted reflections of a spiritual realm. And so if we were to go ahead without those commentaries, if he died, we would just left to be think this is some like love romance. And again, you see people take it like that. You see it in India, you see it in the West. They just read, oh, it's beautiful love affair of young boy and young girls, and he has many, many boy girlfriends, and this must be what we should be doing, is acting out on our passions and having many, many girlfriends. It's got nothing to do with that at all. The idea is that Krishna is God, and therefore all of us are his girlfriends. Like you guys are his girlfriends because we're all feminine and there's one divine masculine. We even have a perverse concept of masculine and feminine. And I say perverse means it's the opposite of what we think of in this world. This world is a mirror reflection. A mirror reflection appears like the reality, but it's actually not what it is. It's not what it appears to be. Just like, and we've noticed, anybody who's thoughtful realizes that this material world is filled with illusions. We say filled with Maya. Maya means that which is not, right? So if I'm driving in a desert on a hot day, that there is a lake in the middle of the road.
Mm-hmm.
There is no lake, but it's not that the mirage is nothing. Right. Some people and some philosophies will say, like Buddhists will say, well, it's the whole material world is nothing. It's all nothing. No, it's something. It's just not what it appears to be. So in Bhakti, they explain the illusion, but they say it is something. It's just not what it appears to be. A mirage is the reflection of the gases with light and making it appear like water. It is something. It's just not a lake. So in the same sense, there is attraction in this material world, but that attraction won't satisfy our heart. There is one attraction, and that's the attraction to God. So we have to get back into reality. We've been living in this illusion for so long that and banging our head against the wall to be happy. We have to get reconnected with source. That's what's going to make us generally happy. And it's asking us to step out of the mirror of life. So the Krishna book, Prabhupada having the foresight that he would leave this world, he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to jump ahead and I'm going to translate the entire 10th canto with purports, with explanations, but write it into a story form. So it reads like a story, but it also reads in very, very deep philosophy as well. Sure, if you want a quick story, you can buy 10th canto comic books. You can watch, Little Krishna comics. You can read any other version, but you will not get these very weighty and deep commentaries that Prabhupada wrote into the actual text. And by the way, those commentaries are not his. He's not like making them up or dreaming them up. He's hearing them from previous masters because he studied the commentaries of not only his teacher who wrote a commentary on it, but all the other great previous acharyas like Sridhar Swami, Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur, etc. They all wrote commentaries. He studied them all. And then after he did that, he went back and did the Bhagavatam again. And he did end up leaving this world at the very beginning of the 10th canto. So we're fortunate that he did write the Krishna book. And therefore, we have these very, very powerful stories of Krishna that do something to us in a deep, deep way that we can't even understand. They wake up something within us. And once you get into the philosophy of Krishna Bhakti, you might not agree with everything. You may think it's sort of foreign and weird and that it doesn't, you don't fit in with it. Whatever you think about it, good or bad, you will say something has affected me deeply and something is going to change this is going to change my life forever. Even if it stays on the back of your mind forever. There's nothing in this world like this philosophy and this culture and this lifestyle. And it will, and if you do take the entire meal, it's powerfully transformative in a deep way. Doesn't matter what religion you are or whether you had no previous religion, whether you believe in God or don't believe in God, this stuff works. And I've been doing it since I was, 18 years old. I'm 58 years old right now. And it all makes sense. It not only makes sense, it actually works in your life. And you can, I lived at time as a monk, but I've also lived at times as a householder. I've raised 5 children, so it's not like it's only for monks. Everybody else loses. You have to give up everything. No, you can have careers, you can have families, you can have teenagers, you can have everything of this world, but you reserve a special place in your consciousness for sweet Krishna. And I like to say sweet Krishna because God was always told to me, I joke, like God was always explaining to me like Judge Judy, who's waiting to condemn me for 25 to life, But Krishna's not like that. Krishna is very, very sweet. And if anything, he's just giving you good advice so you yourself don't wreck your life. And it's safe to say we've all made choices that could have potentially wrecked our lives, and we've been saved again and again. And we're here now inquiring, and we're in a good place. We're all in a good place. If you're listening to this podcast, you're in a good place. It means you want more out of life. You want some positive transformation, and you want to raise the bar in your consciousness, and that's a great thing. So I hope that was okay. You guys are great. I really appreciate what you're doing. You're giving a lot of light in a dark place. And the fact that this is even a conversation nowadays is a very beautiful thing.
Well, Prabhu, we need to thank you as well.
Yeah.
We haven't even mentioned your podcast, Wisdom of the Sages.
Yeah.
If you like what we're doing, it is a pebble in front of the mountain that you to by
Seriously, right? We're like your little offspring. They were just like, yeah, we're gonna do it too.
You are the beautiful child, perhaps.
Yes.
The beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah,
child.
so Raghunath is talking about Srimad Bhagavatam on Wisdom of the Sages. You can check them out on any podcast platform, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I've been listening to you guys on YouTube for 4 years.
Wow.
They break through the Srimad Bhagavatam and this immaculate meal of nourishment for the soul. They are expanding, not only with the podcast, not only every day, taking the Srimad Bhagavatam and expanding it into so much down-to-earth wisdom, but they have expanded into a community of devoted souls, devotional souls. And it is so available to take this wisdom and bring it into every aspect of your life. Actually transform all of your life, externally and internally. So we are eternally grateful to you.
Thank you so much, Balaram. And thank you, Jake. And thank you, Brian. Brian, thanks for being so vulnerable and sharing. I appreciate that so much. And check out my new book. My book's called Punk to Monk.
I have it waiting for me in Tucson. I'm excited.
All right, great.
Yeah.
And,
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Let's stay connected. Okay. How about that? Now that we've done this, let's do it again.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sounds good.
We like
Okay.
to finish every show chanting Maha Mantra 3 times. So, Prabhu,
Great.
if you could please lead us off.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare
Krishna
Krishna.
Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna,
Krishna, Hare
Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna
Hare
Krishna,
Hare,
Hare Hare,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you.
Okay, my friends, have a great day. Haribol.
Hare Krishna.